All right, let's put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now. Want to remind you, subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to get up to 500 likes on this show. We need an army with us for each and every show here on Inside College Basketball Now. And we need you to be all you can be. And also a programming note. On Mondays and Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern, Inside College Basketball Now will be happening each and every Monday and Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern for the rest of the 25-26 college basketball season. On Mondays, you can find us on CBS Sports Network. And if you're not available to join us during that 1 o'clock time slot on Mondays and Thursdays, get with us on Apple or Spotify on your commute home or during your early morning workout. Please make us part of your routine. And in addition to those shows on Mondays and Thursdays, Inside College Basketball Now will be bringing you additional episodes each week with exclusive interviews with some of the biggest and best names in the sport. Stay tuned to my Twitter feed for those. But as always, we start right away with three big things. And there are certain games that always stand out throughout the course of the season. And I think one thing that we have seen consistent this year in college basketball, despite all the issues that are going on off the court, with the transfer portal, with name, image, and likeness, with potential NCAA tournament expansion, with the whole deal that surrounded pro players coming back to college basketball, one thing that can't be debated is the quality of play in between the lines on the court is as good or better than it's ever been. And think about what we have seen the past couple of weeks. St. John's and UConn played a classic at Madison Square Garden. North Carolina and Duke had an epic game in Chapel Hill that Seth Trimble won at the buzzer. Earlier this week, Houston and Iowa State, a Big 12 classic at Hilton Coliseum that came down to the wire until Nate Heisey made that big shot for the Cyclones. All of those games, though, might have been outdone by what we saw last night in Tuscaloosa between Alabama and Arkansas. The Crimson Tide won by a bucket. The Crimson Tide won in multiple overtimes. It was a game that featured all of the great things that great games feature in any sport. Ties, lead changes, momentum shifts. Alabama, as always, under Nate Oates, is an offensive juggernaut. Big game for LeBaron Philon. Big game down low for Aiden Sherrill. You know what you're getting out of the Crimson Tide as a commodity moving forward because Nate Oates has built the most consistent program in the SEC over the last half decade. But with that, the main storyline I took away from this game was not involving Alabama. The main storyline that I took away from this game was regarding the team that lost to Alabama. And I know I've been saying this for a while now, and I know I've been saying this, obviously, very, very carefully because of, obviously, the backlash you could get. But I want to say it nice and calm and nice and clear right now because I think last night reiterated the statement. You can make a legitimate case right now that Darius Acuff is the best freshman college point guard that has ever played for John Calipari. And I don't want to say it's not a debate because of the guys that preceded him at that position. Derrick Rose, Tyreke Evans, John Wall, Brandon Knight, De'Aaron Fox. The list goes on and on and on. But with that said, Darius Acuff now isn't just the point guard who was operating a little bit in the shadows because Arkansas wasn't getting the same national attention as other programs. Darius Acuff right now has a claim to be a first-team All-American. Darius Acuff right now has a claim to be the best point guard in college basketball. Darius Acuff right now is separating himself from the other freshman point guards that have played for John Calipari. And when I started doing this, a little over 20 years ago, I remember when John Calipari was recruiting Derrick Rose at Memphis because he had good teams at Memphis before he had Derrick Rose, but he had never had a player of that ilk. He had Darius Washington. He had Willie Kemp. And those teams went very far in the NCAA tournament. 06 and 07 at Memphis, John Calipari went to the Elite Eight and lost to UCLA and to Ohio State, respectively. But now we are looking for all the guys that have preceded Darius Acuff under John Calipari at point guard, the most important position on the floor. This guy is now doing things at a completely different level. Last night against Alabama, Acuff went for 49 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists. And I want to get all your thoughts and comments in the live chat. I will get to it later in the show. So drop a comment and I will get to it. Acuff went for 49, 5, and 5. He had 1 turnover in 50 minutes. And the thing that to me is separating him from the other point guards that have played for Calipari, the way he shoots it, how efficient he is in terms of his assist to turnover ratio, and what he is able to do from an offensive perspective. So I broke out the fine-tooth comb like a CPA on April 14th, and I just wanted to go over number by number Darius Acuff compared to the other elite point guards that have played for John Calipari. Right now, after last night's game against Alabama, Darius Acuff averaging 22.3 points per game, 6.2 assists per game, shooting better than 50% from the field, and he's shooting better than 44% from 3. Let's look now at some of these other names. Derrick Rose at Memphis, 1 year, 07-08, averaged 14.9 points and 4.7 assists. John Wall at Kentucky, 09-10, 16.6 points per game, 8.5 assists per game. Tyreke Evans at Memphis, 17.1 points per game, 3.9 assists per game. De'Aaron Fox at Kentucky, 16.7 points per game, 4.6 assists per game. Now, this story is not 100% written. And what do I mean by that? There is still a lot of basketball left to be played. But as we're coming down now to the final couple of weeks of the regular season, we are seeing a player that could shine and shine at the highest of levels during the NCAA tournament. There, to me, has been a 2-horse race in the SEC Player of the Year award, Darius Acuff and Thomas Houck of Florida. I think now Darius Acuff has not only separated himself from players like Thomas Houck or players like Tyler Tanner at Vanderbilt or LeBaron Philon, but he is now making a claim as being the best point guard in college basketball. And you looked last night at the game, and I'm somebody who has done 2 Arkansas games this year, one against Duke, one against Houston. Both of them were on CBS. Arkansas is the type of team, in my opinion, if the matchups break the right way, Arkansas could find itself in the Final Four. It's probably in the 4 or 5 seed range right now, which means it's going to have a very, very difficult game in the round of 32. And Arkansas has obviously some holes on its roster. I would not want to see Arkansas against a team with the physical size of an Arizona or a Michigan, because I think it could exploit the Razorbacks a bit on the front line. But with Acuff, with Malik Thomas, with Billy Richmond, who to me is the best utility player in college basketball, Arkansas has more than enough to get to the second weekend and be a dark horse Final Four team under John Calipari. The team I saw that was undermanned last night again at Alabama, the team I saw go to Tuscaloosa last night is vastly better than the team that I saw beat St. John's, beat Kansas last year in the NCAA tournament, and then have a lead on Texas A&M in the Sweet 16, only to come up short in the final minutes. Arkansas is vastly ahead of where it was a season ago when it went to the NCAA tournament, beat Kansas, then beat St. John's, and went to the Sweet 16. It is a fascinating storyline to follow, but the fascinating storyline to follow is all the byproduct of one player, Darius Acuff, who, again, is making a real push towards being a first-team All-American. And after the game, John Calipari pointed out that Darius Acuff was dealing with issues to his foot the last couple of days and still managed to play 50 minutes and give you 49, 5, 5, and 1 turnover, which makes the other storyline of last night in terms of guards in college basketball that much more baffling. And that, of course, is what happened with Darren Peterson at Oklahoma State for Kansas. Now, I did an interview earlier today, and I told the person who was interviewing me one thing that can't be debated. Darren Peterson has the highest long-term ceiling in college basketball. There are things that he can do that nobody else can do in the sport. He is an effortless offensive talent. Last night, when Kansas played Oklahoma State, Jayhawks blew out the Cowboys, who were fading more and more from the NCAA tournament picture. In 18 minutes, Darren Peterson went for 23, 7 of 12 from the field, 6 of 10 from 3. He is an effortless offensive player. But now, for the first time, we are seeing Bill Self voice his frustration. And after the game, Self openly said to the press after the game, I thought this was something that was behind us. I thought we were beyond this. And you can see now the Hall of Fame head coach, who has admirably brought Kansas back to the level that it belongs at on an annual basis. You can see the frustration that he's going through, because a big part of Kansas's quest to become again a team that is mentioned among the best in the sport, which it is right now, which is a credit to Bill Self, was the fact that Darren Peterson was going to be in tow, was the fact that Darren Peterson was going to be a first-team All-American and give us moments with regularity like he did a couple of weeks ago on the road at Texas Tech, or he did during that ridiculous performance at Allen Fieldhouse against Baylor. It is few and far between. Too many times he's asking to come out of the game. Too many times he's tapping out. And last night was, to me, one of the most baffling and frustrating. He drills a three from the right wing, and then almost as his hand is coming down, taps Bill Self and says, I need a blow. I got to get out of the game. Mind-boggling to me. And now, I'm sure the Kansas staff is thinking this. You are getting set to get ready for the postseason. You are getting set to get ready for the Big 12 tournament and the NCAA tournament. What is the point of having this guy in your rotation if this distraction is not going to go away and dissipate? It is going to be nothing but a lingering cloud over Kansas until Darren Peterson, who has already missed more than a handful of games this season, until he puts this away and addresses it. Because this is lingering, and we now just days, not weeks, we are days away from March. 2 weeks from now, we'll be doing shows in March. Arkansas's guard, tough as nails. Kansas's guard, still a big part of a lingering storyline in college basketball that will not just go away. Another big storyline from Wednesday night in college basketball, Creighton shocked UConn at Gamble Pavilion with a major win for the Blue Jays, who have taken a step back this season compared to past years under Greg McDermott. But Creighton got its best win of the season, and now you start thinking about championship week. And now you start thinking about the fact that Creighton was able to go on the road, put up 91 points at UConn, make 10 of 21 threes. And now you start thinking about the idea that Creighton has not only won at UConn, but it also won at Villanova. Two of the teams from the Big East who are slated to play in the NCAA tournament. Creighton will also play at St. John's Saturday at Madison Square Garden. And now you start thinking about Creighton, and you think about the Big East only having 3 teams projected to play in the NCAA tournament. Creighton's beat 2 of them, UConn and Villanova, on their home floor. That, to me, says Creighton is the bid stealer to watch during the Big East tournament during championship week, because this team, which again is moving on post Ryan Kalkbrenner, post Stephen Ashworth, has been more of a team that's hovered around 500. But with that said, if you're good enough to beat UConn at Gamble Pavilion and you're good enough to beat Villanova on the road, you are good enough to beat anybody at Madison Square Garden during the Big East tournament. And Creighton is going to get a crack at that on Saturday afternoon. But what about UConn? This loss to the Blue Jays effectively drops UConn off the 1 seed line for now. The good thing for the Huskies is that UConn's next 2 games are quad 1 opportunities, and that's something that obviously has not been a common occurrence in the Big East. UConn is going to go on the road to Villanova over the weekend, and then next week in Hartford, UConn will get the rematch with St. John's. Johnny's won a couple of weeks ago at Madison Square Garden. But now we're looking at a dynamic that has shifted in the Big East. UConn, and for good reason, was always viewed as a national title and Final Four contender, and it still is. But in terms of the Big East race, because of UConn's loss last night, because of St. John's win at Marquette, the Red Storm have now won 12 games in a row. That means that St. John's is now in sole possession of first place in the Big East. That means that if St. John's can beat Creighton on Saturday at Madison Square Garden, it will go into UConn, if UConn beats Villanova, with an opportunity to take a 2-game lead over the Huskies next week in Hartford. The buildup for that game cannot be any spicier, because this, to me, the UConn St. John's dynamic was the most anticipated dynamic that we had entering the 25-26 college basketball season. I was at the Garden a couple weeks ago. I did the game on national radio. I had never seen a home turnout for St. John's like I saw. And now the stakes are going to only be bigger next week in Hartford. Tough game for UConn and Villanova. Tough game for St. John's on Saturday against Creighton and Madison Square Garden. But once those games are over, everything could be different. The teams could be equal if St. John's loses and UConn obviously wins, or St. John's could be looking to essentially maybe wrap up the Big East regular season title. It doesn't get any juicier. Now, what does this mean for UConn and its NCAA tournament path? UConn, and I'm going to release my bracket projection Friday morning at 9 a.m. on X, as I always do, my bracket breakdown for that week. UConn, I have moved to the 2 line, and I moved Houston to a 1 seed. That means, and this could be a benefit for UConn for the long term, if you're thinking about things from a geographical perspective, UConn, by being a 2 seed in the East, could then play in Philadelphia, in Washington, D.C., rather than go and be in the South region and potentially have to deal with Houston at the Toyota Center in Houston in the South Regional Final. I know we're speculating a little bit, but that's what we do when you're talking about the NCAA tournament seeding process. Now, a big concern for me, for UConn, has been the defense. In the last 4 games, we have seen UConn lose something defensively. During that span, the Huskies are giving up over 79 points per game. The Huskies last night home against Creighton gave up 91 points. UConn's defense has to be rectified, and Alex Caravan, who has been obviously a model for college basketball over the last 4 years or so, only has a couple of weeks left in his college career. Over the last 5 or 6 games, he's been very sporadic. He's been very up and down. They need him to be more consistent. You need more out of Caravan from a consistency perspective. You also need UConn's defense to be championship level, and it hasn't been. This is going to be a 2-game stretch for the Huskies at Villanova, home against St. John's, that will define their season, because let's make no mistake about it here. If UConn could get these next 2 games, they are right back in play to have one of the best resumes in the country. And here's another thing to point out, because I know a lot of people sometimes forget about this. The NCAA tournament is seeded by your overall body of work. So every game counts the same from opening night till obviously Selection Sunday when the brackets come out. So UConn has the following wins on its resume from earlier in the season: Florida neutral, Illinois neutral, at Kansas. Also a win, obviously, against Texas at home. These are big time wins for the Huskies. Major wins. And now we're in a scenario where we're going to see where the Huskies land. I think you can make an argument for UConn that it would be better served staying away from Houston in the South region at the Toyota Center if they were a 1 seed. But if you're in the East region and the seeds hold, that means you would have to play Cam Boozer and Duke to go to a Final Four. Have to beat somebody to go to a Final Four. That's part of it. Now, speaking of Cam Boozer and Duke, the third big thing I want to get to, Duke, Michigan highlights an elite Saturday in college basketball. Kudos to Dusty May. Kudos for Jen Shire putting this game together in Washington, D.C., which will be the site of the East Regionals in the NCAA tournament. This is a Final Four caliber game. This is a national championship game caliber tilt. And it will be the showcase game that we see on Saturday. Now, I know Arizona is going to play Houston. I know UConn's going to play Villanova. But Duke, Michigan is the marquee showdown on Saturday, and there is no doubt about it. Now, what's at stake in this non-conference game? I think you can say without hesitation that the winner of this game between Duke and Michigan will be the team that has the inside track to be the #1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament on Selection Sunday. Now, Michigan, as I talked about earlier in the week, is in the midst of having a week where it's going to play 2 Final Four games. Michigan answered the bell earlier in the week at Mackey Arena. It was unbelievable what the Wolverines did, holding Purdue to under 40% shooting from the field and just over 30% shooting from 3 at Mackey Arena. It was straight domination. The 2-point defense with the Daimara was off the charts. But it also brings a couple of other things to the forefront for me, because I had talked ad nauseum about the fact that when Michigan lost to Wisconsin, the Badgers had to make 15 threes to leave Ann Arbor with a 3-point win. I think when you split the atom, it is safe to say that any team that has a chance to beat Michigan is going to have to make at least 10 3-point shots to win the game. You are not going to be able to get inside of that defense in the paint. You are not going to be able to get layups or post-ups. I went over the numbers. Duke right now is averaging 8.8 made threes per game. That's not going to be enough on Saturday. Duke needs big shooting from Isaiah Evans. Duke needs big shooting from Cam Boozer and Caleb Foster and Nick Kamenya and Dame Sarr. And that's going to be a major, major key for this game against the Michigan team that I think you can say right now unequivocally is the best team that college basketball has seen since the UConn team that won the national title in 2024 with Klingon, with Caravan, with Steph Castle, with Tristan Newton, and with Cam Spencer. That's what Michigan is right now. And it's not just one guy. For bits and pieces the other night, obviously, it was a Daimara. The Michigan staff, I had a conversation with a staff member last night, continues to rave about what we're seeing from Merez Johnson. Now you have to look at Yaxel Lendeborg as being a guy who's a first or second All-American and a guy who's not getting the proper usage that other guys are getting in terms of guys who are going to be a first or second team All-American because Michigan blows so many teams out. Now you're in a scenario where you're not only depending on Elliot Cadeau, but you're also depending on LJ Kaysen. If one point guard for Michigan doesn't play at a high level, the next one can. It's the best team that college basketball has seen since the 2024 UConn team. And Michigan and Duke will play about as big of a game, non-conference-wise, as you can play in a long, long time. You think about through the years, these non-conference games that happen in the middle of February, and there's been a handful of them throughout the years. Last year, Duke played Illinois at Madison Square Garden. That was obviously a one-sided game. I remember when it was 1 versus 2 in 07-08 at FedEx Forum, when Tennessee played Memphis with Bruce Pearl and John Calipari. This game Saturday has that type of feel. And the winner of this game is going to have the inside track to be the #1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. Michigan obviously headed to be the 1 seed in the Midwest. That means Chicago in the regionals. Duke looking at Greenville and then Washington, D.C. Now, Michigan has been the wagon of all wagons, but I would be remiss if I did not start to tip my cap a little bit more to Illinois, because Illinois right now is skinning the cat different ways. What do I mean by that? Illinois only had 7 made threes on Sunday against Indiana, won the game by 20. Illinois then made 13 threes last night at USC and blew the doors off the Trojans at the Galen Center. I know that Illinois was facing a USC team that didn't have Chad Baker-Mazara. I'm aware of that. I understand that. But with that said, Illinois, now that it's healthy, now that Kai Boswell is back, now that Andrei Stojakovic is back, Illinois is another team that should be discussed as a team that can win a national championship. And the best pathway for Illinois to win a national championship, like everybody else, is to be a 1 seed. I have Illinois on the 2 line right now, but Illinois' next 2 games at UCLA on Saturday and then Michigan at home a week from Friday are both quad 1 opportunities. There's a path for the Illini to get there, but it's going to take, obviously, 2 wins over the next week, 8 days or so, not losing in the final 2 regular season games, which are Oregon and Maryland. I don't expect Illinois to, and then doing some work in the Big Ten tournament. But Brad Underwood's had a lot of really good teams over the last half decade during his tenure at Illinois. Kofi Cockburn and Ayo Dosunmu led Illinois to a 1 seed in 2021 in the bubble. I was there. I was as shocked as anybody when Loyola Chicago got that Illinois team in the bubble. This year, they got knocked out in the round of 32 to Houston. That was a good team. I wouldn't say it was a great team. The next best team probably was 2024 with Shannon and Domask and Colin Hawkins and Quincy Guerrier that went to the Elite Eight and lost to UConn and Boston. I'm not ready to say this is the best team that Brad Underwood has had since he's been at Illinois, but to me, it looks like it is on that track. And a big reason to me why is because this team is so hard to match up with because of how well the bigs on Illinois shoot the basketball. David Mirkovic, Tomislav Ivasic, Ben Humrickhouse, Zvonimir Ivasic. You've got shooters all up the court. You've got incredible size. You've got incredible spacing. Illinois has and always will have one of the great fan bases in college basketball. Final Four in 89, Final Four in 2005, thirsty for another one. It could happen this year. Regardless of Illinois is a 1 seed or not, I would expect Illinois to start, obviously, the first weekend of the NCAA tournament in nearby St. Louis, and we'll see how things fall beyond that. Want to get your thoughts in the chat. Want you to leave your comments in the chat. I will get to them when I return. I'm going to take a quick break, but as always, you're hanging with Jon Rothstein on Inside College Basketball Now.
This is European soccer's biggest stage.
Written in the stars! What a difference she has made!
The question is, can you handle it?
Can you handle it?
The crowd here feels electric. Stream every match of the UEFA Women's Champions League on Paramount+.
All right, welcome back to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein. I want to remind you, subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now with Jon Rothstein on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. We are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube. We want to get up to 500 likes on this show. So leave us a comment in the chat as well. I will get to them in a matter of minutes. And also a programming note. Mondays and Thursdays, I'll be coming to you here on Inside College Basketball Now live at 1 o'clock Eastern. Monday's show is on CBS Sports Network. And in addition to those 2 shows, Inside College Basketball Now will be bringing you additional episodes with some of the biggest and best names in the sport featuring exclusive interviews. But let's get right now to the chat, and let's dive into things. I'm going to do some rankings here in a bit as well. Let's see what's going on with this chat. A lot of people excited about March Madness, and obviously we're happy about that. This chat is always more the tortoise than the hare here. Okay, let's look right here. The Wayno analysis said, John, UConn showed early in the season they were a 1, but St. John's came and dismantled their defense. It's pretty simple to me. The footage was used to study UConn's defense and poke holes in it. Look, UConn the last 2 weeks has not been great defensively. Dan Hurley puts as much pride into his defense as any coach. Rim protection's got to be better, but Creighton was also able to go over the top of UConn's defense last night and make 10 threes. Villanova could try, obviously, do the same thing. That's going to be a big-time game on Saturday night. Catmaster 4000 says, Acuff is the most underrated player in the country. As a Florida fan, I'm scared to play him next week. Well, I'll just say this. Darius Acuff now, with the way that he's performing, is becoming appointment television. And you don't always see that, obviously, from players at the guard spot in terms of, in my opinion, his ability to change a game. I think Darius Acuff is becoming somebody who, again, is going to be mentioned now as the best point guard in college basketball. Like, Braden Smith, great. I love Braden Smith. Keaton Wagler's more of a combo. Braden Smith's more of a traditional point guard. But if you had a game to win right now, and it's not an easy question to answer, who are you taking? Braden Smith, or are you taking Darius Acuff? The guys who pull people in from the periphery are the DeBonsas, are the Boozers, are the Caleb Wilsons, obviously Darren Peterson. Acuff, though, in my opinion, is taking a seat at that table from the point guard spot. He's not just a setup guy. He's ridiculously effective. He's ridiculously efficient. He doesn't turn it over. He played 50 minutes. He had 1 turnover, and he had 49 points. Let's go back to the chat right now. Somebody says SEC Player of the Year is between Acuff and Phylon. I give a slight nod to Hauk, but I don't hate that. A lot of Dalen Swain love right here. Dalen Swain deserves some love. Look, Dalen Swain's been great for Texas. Sean Miller's done a great job for Texas. No doubt about that. I've highlighted Dalen Swain. I think, though, that will come more and more as much as Texas keeps winning. Texas obviously off the bubble, though, for now. Let's see right here. Good question here from Steven Kleinknecht. John, what 5 teams do you trust the most on an away or a neutral court? Good question. I would say the top 5 teams I trust the most: Michigan, Duke, Arizona, Houston, and Illinois. Iowa State close 6th. I'm really, really high on this Illinois team right now. Another team that's becoming appointment television. Then we got Tomal Alexander 4835 just says SJU Red Storm. Look, if you are a St. John's fan right now, you have to be in a situation where you understand that you're living in the golden era of St. John's basketball. Stuff like this doesn't happen here, where St. John's is going to win 12 games in a row. Stuff like this doesn't happen where St. John's has a chance to outright win 2 Big East regular season titles in a row. This was all divine intervention from the gods of college basketball. And I'm going to say it so St. John's fans can appreciate the next couple of weeks. This program was barren. This program was stripped down. Rick Pitino was exiled from college basketball. He went to Greece. During the start of the global pandemic, he got the Iona job. It was a way back into college basketball. It was a way to come back to New York. He crushed it at Iona. St. John's was in dire straits. He was in a latter point of his life. The last thing he wanted to do was move. It was a Big East job. It was coaching in the Garden. That coincides with the transfer portal and with name, image, and likeness, and with St. John's having a billionaire booster in Mike Rapoli. A billionaire booster. All of this happened for St. John's, and now we're seeing the results. There was so much talk early on about St. John's roster and the flaws that it had. Not enough shooting, not a pure point guard, disjointed in terms of the pieces fitting. As it turns out, St. John's roster is just fine. St. John's roster is just not a carbon copy of the team last year that played its way to a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, winning the Big East regular season and also winning the Big East tournament title. St. John's has a roster right now that has led to a 21-5 record with a significantly more difficult non-conference schedule. Games against Alabama, games against Iowa State, games against Kentucky. Rick Pitino is now in prime position to lead St. John's to another 25-plus win season and potentially a top 16 protected seed in the NCAA tournament. All things are still a ways away, but closer than you think. 21-5, have not lost since early January. 12 straight wins for the Red Storm. Now, we are in the time of year where college basketball is in the spotlight. And that's directly related to the bubble. So as always, with my Rothstein rankings, I'm going to give you, going 5-1, 5 bubble teams that need to start winning. And obviously, we're starting with this weekend. Number 5 on the list is the Virginia Tech Hokies. Virginia Tech had a big win a little over a week ago at Clemson, and since then had a very bad loss at home against Florida State, and then also had a very difficult loss on the road the other night at Miami. Virginia Tech still is going to play at Carolina and at Virginia. Hokies got to win one of those games to make the NCAA tournament as an at-large. Number 4 is VCU. VCU is on the quiet 10-game winning streak maybe in the history of college basketball. Phil Martelli has done a great job, Phil Martelli Jr., in taking over the Rams program. Went to the NCAA tournament last year at Bryant. There is a smaller margin for error when you are playing in the Atlantic 10 versus a power conference. But if you split the atom on VCU's resume, there are not any bad losses. The worst loss is at George Mason. VCU played NC State tough. VCU played St. Louis tough at home. VCU also played Utah State tough on a neutral court. VCU, to be an at-large team in the NCAA tournament, has to Friday night in the game of the year in the Atlantic 10, go to Chaifetz Arena and beat St. Louis, and then it has to win the rest of its regular season games and go deep in the A-10 tournament. That is the path for Phil Martelli Jr. and company to get an at-large bid. Have to beat St. Louis on Friday night at Chaifetz Arena. I can't wait for the game. It's the game of the year in the Atlantic 10. Number 3, Santa Clara. Santa Clara lost a major opportunity last weekend at home against Gonzaga to move the needle. I am still going to have the Broncos as of today in my bracket. Santa Clara can't lose any more of its regular season games to feel good about its at-large chances. 22-6 right now, home win over St. Mary's, but Santa Clara also has to deal with the fact that it lost a game to Loyola Chicago in a neutral court. To me, Santa Clara's got to win out, including beating St. Mary's and Moraga. That would be a sweep over St. Mary's. That would be enough to get Santa Clara into the bracket. Auburn fell to 14-12 with a loss against Mississippi State last night. Stephen Pearl's squad built major equity early, beating Arkansas, beating Texas, beating St. John's in Las Vegas, beating NC State at home. But Auburn now is on a major, major slide. And Auburn's season will come down to Saturday's game against Kentucky. After that, Auburn's at Oklahoma, Ole Miss at home, at Alabama. Tigers have to win on Saturday to make the NCAA tournament as an at-large, in my opinion, because other than that, the games at Oklahoma and the games at Ole Miss are going to hurt you more than they help you. But if Auburn does not win on Saturday and it goes to 14-13, it's going to take winning out in a major, major run in the SEC tournament, in my opinion. And number 1 is UCLA. Now, UCLA got blown out at Michigan and at Michigan State. 17-9 right now, 2 quad 1 wins, no quad 3 or 4 losses. The win over Purdue is huge, but there needs to be more meat on the bone for the Bruins' resume. UCLA has been in the news the last couple of days because of what happened in the Michigan State game. Mick Cronin obviously felt that Stephen Jamerson, one of his players, committed too hard of a foul. We did not get the full explanation on that for why Stephen Jamerson was ejected from the game. It was obviously a moment that's been embarrassing for the school. It's created a national story. There was also something with a reporter after the game. The best way to remedy a situation like this, especially in a pressure cooker job like UCLA, is to beat Illinois on Saturday night. I've covered Mick Cronin for 20 years. To me, this is the same person that we saw fighting, scratching, and clawing at Cincinnati. Doesn't make it right. He is who he is. The spotlight on him at UCLA is significantly bigger than it was at Cincinnati. But it's the same person that I saw in the old Big East at Cincinnati. It's just manifesting itself in a different way. And from my perspective, this is why he's really upset. UCLA, after the season last year, knew it needed to upgrade its point guard position. So it went and got Donovan Dent. Part of the pitch to Donovan Dent was the opportunity to play with Adai Mara. UCLA thought it was going to be able to retain a Daimara. He comes back, says he wants to go in the transfer portal. This is college basketball in 2025, transfers to Michigan. UCLA was not able to get a replacement anywhere near the caliber of a Daimara. And two of the things that we've talked about all season long when we talked about some of the issues for UCLA was production at the 5 spot and also defense, which is directly related to what? Rim protection. So UCLA, who came in as a preseason top 15 team, has not lived up to expectations. Sky Clark, who was the most consistent guard for this team throughout the first 2 months of the season, has missed 5 weeks due to injuries. It has been a very difficult season for the Bruins. That doesn't mean that the frustration should manifest itself the way that it has this week. That's just part of the deal. And this is the person that you're dealing with. He's not going to change. This is who he is. And that path and that demeanor is how he was able to build Cincinnati's program from the ashes and then build UCLA into a program that pre-NIL was one of the top 4, 5, 6 programs in college basketball, the way it operated from 2021 when UCLA went to the Final Four. Then 22 and 23, despite massive injuries, made the Sweet 16. But UCLA has to beat Illinois to take a step forward towards being in the NCAA tournament. The Bruins, aside from the Illinois game, will also have quad 1 opportunities home against Nebraska and also on the road at USC. But I'll say this, beating Illinois, and I've talked about Illinois for a large portion of the show, beating Illinois is the type of win that would improve UCLA's seed in the NCAA tournament by a seed line or 2. Let's get to 3 good nuggets right now before we get out of here. Some notes from around the world of college basketball. Nugget number 1, Matt is able. Talking about NC State's Matt Abel, when he scores in double figures, the Wolfpack are 9-2. Nugget number 2, West Coast Blues. The 4 Big Ten teams who are from the West Coast. UCLA, USC, Washington, and Oregon are combined 6-19 this season in conference games played outside of the Pacific time zone. Nugget number 3, the dream lives. Miami, Ohio is 26-0, and just 2 of the Red Hawks' final 5 regular season opponents are above 500. The dream of an undefeated season is alive and well, and it'll be interesting to see if the Red Hawks can go to the MAC tournament at 31-0, what it means for them if they were to drop a game in Cleveland and not win the automatic qualifier by winning the MAC tournament. 5 games to watch for this weekend. Friday night, we got Indiana at Purdue, UConn at Villanova on Saturday, Arizona at Houston on Saturday. The big one is Duke, Michigan, obviously, in Washington, D.C., Iowa State at BYU on Saturday night. 5 under-the-radar games. VCU is at St. Louis. Love that game Friday night. Then on Saturday, Tennessee is at Vandy. Illinois is at UCLA. Ohio State at Michigan State on Sunday. And also on Sunday, Iowa at Wisconsin. We need an army with us here on Inside College Basketball Now for each and every show. And we need you to be all you can be. So please like and subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on YouTube, and also subscribe on Apple and Spotify. Again, we need an army with us, and that army, we hope, is with us again Friday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern. I will be joined by Houston's Kelvin Sampson here on Inside College Basketball Now before the Cougars host on Saturday against Arizona, part of a massive 3-game stretch for Houston. Played at Iowa State on Monday, Arizona on Saturday, and then at the Fog to play Kansas on Big Monday next Monday. I'm Jon Rothstein, and this was Inside College Basketball Now.